The morning sun shimmered across the Pacific as the massive naval destroyer USS Valor prepared to depart from the San Diego base. The air buzzed with activity, officers barking orders, sailors hauling supplies, engines rumbling in readiness. Amidst the organized chaos, an old man in a faded navy jacket walked slowly toward the pier. His gait was uneven, his posture bent slightly with age, but his eyes, sharp and determined, told a different story. A eye in his hand, he clutched a small duffel bag, worn from years of use. On his sleeve was a tattered patch, an emblem that had faded with time, but one that carried the weight of history. It was the insignia of the Silent Sharks, a legendary Navy unit believed to have been disbanded decades ago after a classified mission went horribly wrong. "Sir, this area is restricted," barked Lieutenant Connor Hayes, a young Navy officer barely in his 30s, his uniform crisp and freshly pressed. He stepped in front of the old man, blocking his path up the gangway. "I'm here to board the Valor," the veteran said quietly, his voice steady but soft. Hayes frowned. "Board? Sir, with all due respect, you're not on the manifest. Only active personnel are permitted beyond this point." The old man's eyes glimmered with a faint sadness. "I was invited," he said, producing a folded, yellowed piece of paper. The officer glanced at it. It looked more like an old letter than an official pass. "This is from 1989, Hayes scoffed. "Sir, you can't just walk onto a naval destroyer with an old letter. Please step aside." The veteran didn't move. "That ship carries a name that means something to me," he said. "I served on the first Valor. I buried my brothers under that name. I just want to see her sail, one last time." Lieutenant Hayes crossed his arms, unimpressed. "I'm sorry, but that's not possible." A few sailors nearby began to watch, whispering among themselves. Some looked uneasy. There was something in the old man's demeanor that commanded quiet respect, even if they didn't understand why. But to Hayes, it looked like just another stubborn old veteran living in the past. "Sir, please," Hayes insisted, his tone sharpening. "If you don't leave, I'll have to call security." Before the veteran could respond, a calm but authoritative voice cut through the air. "What's going on here, Lieutenant?" It was Admiral Robert T. Mason, the commander of the Pacific Fleet himself. The crowd immediately straightened as he approached, his white uniform gleaming under the sun. "Admiral Mason, sir," Hayes said, snapping to attention. This man was trying to board the ship without authorization. The Admiral's eyes shifted toward the veteran. His expression softened as soon as he saw the patch. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared, his lips slightly parted, as though he were seeing a ghost. "That patch," the Admiral whispered. "Where did you get that?" The old man smiled faintly. "You remember it, don't you, son?" There was a pause. Then, the Admiral's face drained of color. "No, it can't be. Captain Elijah Ward?" Gasps rippled through the nearby sailors. The name carried weight, a legend whispered through Navy halls. Captain Ward had been the commanding officer of the Silent Sharks, a top-secret submarine unit lost during a covert operation in 1987. The mission was never fully declassified, but everyone knew the story. The Sharks went silent deep in enemy waters, never to return. Captain Ward and his crew were presumed dead, and yet, here he was. "I thought you were gone," Mason said, his voice trembling with disbelief. "They told us the entire unit was lost in the Java Trench." "We were," Ward said softly. "At least, most of us. I was pulled out of the wreckage by fishermen 3 days later. They found me half dead, clinging to a piece of the hull. I stayed in a hospital overseas for months, forgotten. By the time I came home, the Navy had already buried me on paper." The Admiral's eyes welled up. "Sir, I served under you. I was just an ensign on the Sharks. You trained me." A deep silence fell. Even the young officer, Hayes, was frozen. His earlier arrogance melted into shame. Ward looked at him, not with anger, but with understanding. "You did your duty, son," he said quietly. "You followed orders. That's what we taught you to do." The Admiral straightened his shoulders. "Lieutenant Hayes, stand down," he ordered. "This man is to be treated with full honors." Hayes saluted immediately, his face flushed. "Yes, sir." Ward gave a small nod of acknowledgement, then turned his gaze toward the ship. "She's a fine vessel," he murmured. "The Valor, I named her predecessor after my crew. I never thought I'd see the name sail again." The Admiral's voice cracked slightly. "Would you do us the honor of stepping aboard, Captain?" The old man hesitated, emotion flickering across his weathered face. Slowly, he walked up the gangway, the crowd of sailors parting for him in solemn silence. Each step seemed to carry the weight of decades, the ghosts of the past walking beside him. When he reached the deck, he stopped and placed his hand gently on the cold steel. "Welcome home, boys," he whispered under his breath. Admiral Mason turned to the crew. "Attention on deck," he roared. Instantly, every sailor stood rigid, saluting the old man. Ward turned to face them, humbled. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "But remember this: every ship, every mission, every victory, it's built on the shoulders of those who came before. Respect your flag, but never forget the faces that held it high when the wind turned against them." His words hung in the air like a prayer. Later, as the Valor began to pull away from the dock, Admiral Mason stood beside the veteran on the observation deck. The two men, one old, one still bearing the fire of youth, watched the horizon. "You know," the Admiral said quietly, "I named her Valor to honor the fallen. I just never knew the man who inspired it would walk back into my life." Ward smiled faintly. "Sometimes, Admiral, the sea takes what it must. But it always gives something back if you wait long enough." The ship's horn bellowed, echoing across the waves. As it did, Captain Ward removed the old silent shark's patch from his sleeve and pressed it against the railing. The wind caught it, carrying it over the water like a memory finally set free, and for the first time in decades, he felt at peace.